views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey folks, here we are. Hey folks, it is time for the Bronx Buzz, and we're looking forward to another really good show today. We're going to be talking to Abigail Savitch-Lew from the City Limits, and also to a new reporter from the Bronx Times Reporter, which we're real excited about. So without further ado, let's go down to the, I guess it's in Lower Manhattan. Is that where you are, Abby? With City Limits. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Always good to have you. A number of things to talk about. You, of course, have been our best expert of all time on the rezoning, in particular the rezoning of Jerome Avenue. You were just telling me before the show that you folks are embarking on a new video project series. I want to know about that. We want to tell the people of the Bronx about that.
Yeah, so I'm sure Bronx residents know that the Jerome Avenue area is being considered for rezoning, and it's moving through the approval process, or the process by which the rezoning can be approved or disapproved. So it's already gone through a vote by the community boards and the borough president, and now it's moving towards a vote by the City Planning Commission in mid-January, and then finally it will go to the City Council for a final vote. And so during this process, we definitely are interested in making sure that residents of the area are still a part of the conversation. And so our wonderful videographer, Mark Busanich, is leading a project by which we've done one so far, and we're going to do another one with Jerome Avenue residents, letting them give us a tour of the neighborhood and their perspective on what these changes will bring if they are passed, both the negative and potentially positive in one person's perspective. Yeah.
You know what's interesting, Abby? On BronxNet's Bronx Talk, I interviewed the chair of Community Board 5. And they, and we both know there has been a lot of objection to this zoning, and their perspective was that they have wanted this for many years, and they want it to be done right. So, it's very easy to kind of hear the voices of many advocates who are against it, but there really is a feeling throughout the district, or the three community boards. It's in there that people are saying, you know what, we really want to improve our neighborhood, and they're hoping this will be the way to do it. I have a question for you about that before we get on to some other topics. Among the things that the community boards expressed about the zoning was, okay, we're going to pass it, but we have considerations. We want an LGBT center and a whole host of other items they wanted on their checklist. Do you see those things as realistic? And I'm going to give you one more thing. I interviewed Vanessa Gibson on Bronx Talk, and I asked her very specifically about, people want these things. So many times in the Bronx, we get promised things and they don't come true. She said, I want to see budgetary considerations for these before things get started with the rezoning. What is your thought about all, the whole notion of these kind of trades or give back on the rezoning?
Yeah, I have a mix of feelings. I feel on the one hand that in areas like East New York and downtown Fort Rockaway, where there has already been rezonings passed, the de Blasio administration has, in some respects, done a pretty good job of living up to the promises they've made in terms of, for instance, if they say they're bringing a workforce one center, then they bring a workforce one center, And so when it comes to some of these community investments, I am not, or like, in East New York, they haven't actually said they'll bring a school to Jerome Avenue. I know they're working on it, but in East New York, they said they'd bring a school, and they are bringing a school, So, and there are some ways in which I think that the de Blasio administration should be credited for living up to some of the promises they made. But, I mean, both, in the case especially of the East New York rezoning, I think there were things that people demanded throughout the process that the administration did not agree to or said they weren't agreeing to yet, and that dissatisfies people. So, for instance, like, right now there's still a lot of people who are demanding that the rezoning be changed to ensure there is more space for auto businesses to stay, like that not as much of the area be rezoned for residential. And I don't know, it's hard to say what the administration's going to do.
I guess what you're telling me is somewhat hopeful because, as you know, and I personally and professionally have been through, the Yankee Stadium situation where parks were promised and the parks ended up not really being that accessible. We also know what's going on, in the lower part of Mill Pond Park. Now there is going to be development there instead of parkland, so people who advocated for parks are not going to get their parks. When it came to filtration plant, they said they were going to fund whatever it was, $200 million. Well, they only spent about $130 million after about 7 years. So those promises. But if you're telling me that the de Blasio administration may be different from Michael Bloomberg, is interested in trying to do this, that's a hopeful thing. I will add also that the borough president, when he approved it, also said there should be these considerations. There should be support for the auto merchants, et cetera. We both know that that whole thing in Willets Point, when those auto merchants were moved out and then supposedly going to relocate in Hunts Point, that all of a sudden that property apparently dried up, and now where are they going to go? I guess we just have to wait and see. Is that what my conclusion is?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, right, it's like the de Blasio administration, like the East New York plan, right, that I'm talking about. That was just passed a year and a half ago, right? So it's like maybe it's too early to completely evaluate the de Blasio administration. Yeah, but I mean, they are tracking things better, tracking their commitments better online.
My personal discussions with some of the people at the local city planning indicated that they were listening. Now, of course, the play out, we'll find out. You were telling me also about federal and state housing. This is a different topic, and that there is now a new coalition. Explain to me what this means and what the implications are for the people in the Bronx.
Definitely. So I think that a lot of people in the Bronx know about rent-stabilized housing, right? They might have family members who, and they know about all the different ways that rent-stabilized housing can become destabilized, right? Or like the rents can go up, even though they're supposed to just go up by the Rent Guidelines Board. But there are many different ways in which the rents can go up much more than what the Rent Guidelines Board approves.
Funny how that happens, yeah.
Yeah. What? Yeah,
I said it's funny how that happens. Yeah.
It's I think when a lot of these rezonings take place or whatever, like a lot of people mention the problem with all the ways that rent stabilized housing is being undermined, or they might say like public housing is undermined by the fact that there's not enough resources to keep those buildings up to par, right? And so I think there's a lot of these issues that in fact advocates are saying they really want the state to take more responsibility because rent stabilized law is really rent stabilized law is set by the state, and they also see the city, but also the state could do more to support NYCHA. So there's this new coalition that's formed of a bunch of different housing and community organizations, and groups like Metropolitan Council on Housing, Local New York, Make the Road New York, and also some groups upstate like Take Back the Land Rochester. And so
they're all getting together? That's what you're telling me? That they're saying, okay, let's speak with one voice?
Yes, they're getting together and they are fighting for demands that have to do with both, city issues like the rent stabilized system here, but also issues faced by renters who are struggling in other cities in the state and public housing here and elsewhere. And so they're hoping to influence the budget and legislation session in the spring on the state level. But of course, a lot of this is also dependent on some of the ongoing political problems in the state.
In the state, and listen, certainly if we're talking about public housing, some of that has to be, in fact, a lot of that has to come out of the federal government. We only got about a minute and a half. Talk to me about the new tax bill and what the implications are of that in regards to housing in the Bronx.
I was looking at this earlier this week. A lot of, lots of people have lots of things, there's a lot of the different types of analysis that should be done of this federal tax bill. A lot of people say its full range of consequences is poorly understood. But one thing that people are talking about is the lowering of the corporate tax rate means tax credits to companies are no longer as valuable, and tax credits, the low-income housing tax credit specifically, is used to fund a lot of housing.
So you're saying that's an interesting extrapolation, one step to the other. So it makes it less, those tax credits less available because the tax rate is lower. So what are you applying for?
Right, and there's also, of course, concerns that the tax cuts on wealthier Americans will lead to spending cuts, on things like public housing, as you just said. So there's a lot of wait and see right now. Yes, and I'm sure a lot of advocacy that's going to be done.
And one of the nice things about it, as difficult as those issues sound, is that we have really good reporters like Abigail Savitch-Lew from City Limits who can report to us and let us know what the heck is going on. So Abby, say hello to Jarrett and all my buddies over there at City Limits. We thank you for your time. And mostly we also wish you a happy and peaceful new year.
Thank you so much, Gary.
All the best. See you around town. Okay. That means me and you, are going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to meet a new reporter from the Bronx Times Reporter. Don't go away.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything.
Oh, sorry.
Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
We are there, day one, with baby names and a gift that lasts a lifetime. We are there as you grow, protecting you and those you love. And we are there as you start your next chapter. We are with you through life's journey. We are Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. Get to know us at socialsecurity.gov.
This video produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and as I said, a brand new reporter with the Bronx Times Reporter, and that, of course, is this newspaper. It is my pleasure to my first meet and greet and your first meet and greet with Sarah Valenzuela. Nice to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. A little background first, then we'll get into some of the things you've been writing about. So how long have you been with the Bronx Times?
I've been with the Bronx Times since the end of October. I'm still fairly new, so it's only been a few months.
Yeah, but you're doing great. I mean, if you haven't seen, she's really written some great stories and really important stuff. A little background. So now, are you from the Bronx?
I'm actually not from the Bronx.
Uh-oh. So that's it. Get her out of here. And so where are you from, and how did you wind your way here?
I'm actually from Queens, born and raised in Jamaica, Queens.
Okay. She's forgiven for that. She's doing a good job for us so far.
I found my way this way because of an alumni from my school who said the Bronx Times reporter is looking for a new reporter, someone who's in New York City, knows this place better.
Right.
So I jumped right on board and I picked up.
Picked up, and you told me just before the show that you went to Syracuse.
Yes.
And you studied mass media, journalism, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I went to Syracuse University.
Right.
I studied broadcast and digital journalism. Fun fact, I graduated last year.
Ah, there you go. So this is your first job?
This is.
Why did you or do you want to be in journalism? Like, what is it that interests you?
So it actually started a long time ago. You know, when you're growing up, your parents, grandparents, everyone asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. When I was a little girl, my grandma said, do you want to be that? And she points to, I was watching New York One at the time, she points to a person who was giving the news, the 5 o'clock news. And I said, yeah, okay, yeah, I think so. I don't know.
This is good. I like this.
So I kind of just stuck with that. And as time went on, I realized how much I really enjoyed not just being able to hear stories, but being able to tell them to other people. There are some stories out there that deserve to be heard, and of course
deserve to be told.
Yeah. So you're a journalist.
Thank you.
So it's just really that idea that I get to go out into the community, listen to what people have to say, hear some cool stories, maybe some controversial stories, and get that message out there. Let people know that this is what's happening in your community.
What's it been like so far? Do tell. I won't tell any of the people at the Bronx Times what you really say. But no, what's it been like in particular covering the Bronx? What I'm always interested in, and I know our viewers are as well, when people come to the Bronx and they work as journalists, they learn a lot about who we are and about the Bronx. So how's it been, and what have you learned? So
far, it's been incredible. Every week has been something new, something different. There are some similarities here and there. So for the first week that I was working there, the first 2 weeks I felt like I was covering Veterans Day parades, Veterans Day outreach for everything. So after a while I was, okay, maybe we can move on. Let's see what else is going on in the community. So there was 1 week I covered a community board meeting. This community in Castle Hill was up in arms over some new property, or not new property. There was going to be some new program opening in the middle of their neighborhood, and they were very frustrated about this. And I said, okay, well, this story deserves to be told, because this little community is so upset about what's happening here, and this needs to be addressed. What you're tapping into really from the beginning, and it frankly for me, I've been around in the Bronx for a long time, fascinating to listen to. This is what the Bronx has been about, because people have been starved for the opportunity to be able to tell the story, to find good reporters, be able to write the story, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess you're fitting right in. Let's talk about a couple things you wrote about. One is, and I guess this fits right into the genre we're talking about, you wrote about a protest at the Savitch-Lew Library. Yes. What was that about? So there, at the Savitch-Lew Branch Library, they've been missing 2 children's librarians, and that's not something that people would usually think too much of. Usually the New York Public Library gets forgotten now and again. So these... Excuse me, especially because right now you don't go in there as often as we used to do to take out books. You go in there as a resource center, as access to computers and guidance on how to do things, right? I mean, that's what we're tapping in as opposed to the way it used to be. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah, so there's these 2 vacant children's librarians positions that are open, and parents and other community members who really use this library as more than just a resource center were frustrated over the fact that it's taken about, I think, 4 months now that these positions have been vacant. The parents figured, okay, if they're vacant, maybe it'll take a few weeks, because I think they said the people who used to work there were internally transferred somewhere else, so they figured, oh, it'll be a few weeks, and now it's been 4 months.
And nobody would say anything or do anything until people made some noise about it. And you know, one thing I want to add, if you talk about 4 months, these 4 months from September to December, that's it. That's when school is on. In other words, that's when you need it. You know, it's one thing maybe the summer you ease up, but that's right. That's when people need those resources, right?
Yeah, so they were really frustrated, but I was told by the New York Public Library that they have put in some temporary replacements, and they're going to be filling those positions by the end of, I think, the end of December.
All right, so I'm going to look forward to, and I'm telling my friends who are editors over there at the Bronx Times, let's send Sarah back out there with the good news and say that, you know, that maybe there was a nice result to what you wrote about and what the people were concerned about. You did a nice story about a guy who's a friend of mine, Ted Mishansky, who has a new book. And I thought it's fascinating because it's about growing up in the Bronx. Let's talk about Ted in his book.
Yeah, so Ted, first of all, he was an incredible person to talk to. He had
amazing,
amazing stories to tell. The book that he wrote, it's called Growing Up BX. It focuses on his account of when he fled from Germany post-Holocaust. He said he was a refugee, and he came to the Bronx with his family, and it was really just that narrative between him growing up in the Bronx, a new place for him, and all the friends the friends that quote unquote friends that he made, because not all of them were people there. Some of them were books, and it's really just about finding your place and realizing that even though you may feel like you're alone, you could be bullied, but you're not alone. There are other people who are going through the same problems.
You know, there's two things I want to mention about that. Number one, it is based on a lot of his memories and experiences, but it is written as fiction, so to speak. It's not like an autobiography. And the second part of that is that experience of coming from another country, coming from difficult circumstances, trying to fit in the borough of the Bronx. This is a story we tell, you know, almost all the time.
Oh, of course. Yeah. But so I brought that up to him. I was, why write another book? He said, well, every story, and it fit right in with what I personally believe, every story has another unique way to be told, and he said it only makes you a better person by listening to the story.
Right. Or another article, she's written so much stuff in a very short period of time, but this is in what is, I guess, last week's edition. We're about to get a new one, is this idea of a new bank, Santander Bank, which many people might not have heard of. Talk to me about the new bank and what the implications are for the community it's going to be located in.
Yeah, so the bank opened a new branch in the South Bronx, so along Grand Concourse and 161st Street. I visited the branch. It's pretty nice. It's very vibrant. Of course, a lot of the surrounding community was not as acclimated to that bank because Santander is not as prominent as, say, a Chase or a Citibank.
Or something like that, yeah.
So their premise is really trying to help the community in terms of financial literacy and giving back. So they said for every branch that they open, they plan to give back into the community. So when they opened this branch, they donated about $12,000 to two local organizations.
Oh, that's excellent.
So it fits right in to what they want to do, they're not just a bank that's opening, they want to give back to where they're opening.
What is frustrating for many of us in the Bronx, and certainly in the southern part of the BX, it's been underbanked, and we haven't had that. And what many people don't realize, among the issues that is number one, your personal finances It's very difficult to get cash, to cash your checks. I mean, it's hard to manage. The second part of it is loans for businesses. So if you're a business, you want to go to the local bank who understands your business and be able to borrow money. The fact that there's another bank in that part of the Bronx, good thing. I put it on my checkbox. I say, I like that idea. So I'm sure you got that sense from them, because it sounds like they want to be part of the community.
Yeah, so what I was really trying to gauge from them was, I mean, not many people in the area know their bank. A lot of people, when I went to visit the branch, a lot of people would pass by. This is a bank.
And now they know, because they read the Bronx Times. That's the whole idea.
So it was really, they said that in order to fit into the community, they said they want to help in any which way they can. So even if you don't have an account, they'll talk to you about loans. They'll talk to you about financial literacy.
Financial literacy, I was going to say, is educating people about what the opportunities are. So what's next? Now, we didn't see the new paper yet. It's coming out very shortly. But tell me either what's in the paper or what do you have coming up?
So coming into the paper that comes out on Friday, so tomorrow.
Tomorrow, there you go.
I worked on 4 stories. They're a little spaced out in terms of where, like, categories.
Just give me one.
So
your favorite one, you're not allowed to say, but your favorite one out of the 4.
My favorite one of those 4 stories was a holiday toy drive. There's so many holiday toy drives.
Millions, which is good, which is great. We like that.
But this one was hosted, so it was held inside Conti's pastry shop. It was hosted by both Conti's and Electric Paradise Tan. And they came up with this whole toy drive in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks they had like $6,000 worth of toys. I walked in there.
Sorry, I'm going to applaud. I like the idea. So I think it's great.
I walked in, and you smell the pastries, but the whole back side of the store
was covered
toys.
in toys. You know, Sarah, it's really uplifting, because yes, it's not news in that way, but when you go and you do it, and I know as a young reporter, it's very uplifting, because you see there's something happening. Right, and you can feel it. Listen, Sarah Valenzuela, we are thrilled that you are here in the Bronx. Queens, your loss. I'm sorry, but really, you're just. I know you're going to continue to do a great job, and even more important to me, you're going to come back here and we'll talk about it.
Absolutely.
Great. There we are. You got your first meet of Sarah Valenzuela from the Bronx Times Reporter, and guess what that means? It's time to go. We will see you next week. We'll see you Monday night. Very special holiday show on Bronx Talk this Monday night with the Renaissance Youth Center. Something you really want to see. We did kind of a holiday show. Thanks to Sarah. Thanks to Abigail Savitch-Lew. Thanks to you, to the crew of thousands. See you. Happy holidays. Good night.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate, and it's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.